Elizabeth Moffly served on the Charleston County School Board for many years, representing the East Cooper area. Now she wants to return to the Charleston County School Board to tackle issues in District 2. I talked one-on-one with Elizabeth for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Elizabeth Moffly, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. Glad to be here.
Likewise. The last time I had you on Quintin's Close-Ups for many years was when obviously you were on the Charleston County School Board. Now you're back because you want to represent the constituents and students and teachers of District 2. And I know the newly created single-member district includes Arndale, where you live, McClellanville, the Isle of Palm, Sullivan's Island, and parts of Mount Pleasant from Park West and Carolina Park all the way over to the Old Village. Tell me why, Elizabeth Moffly, why the Charleston County School Board again?
I think they need help. It's my passion, as you well know. Education has been something after having 4 children and really diving deep into what we do. We still are doing a lot of things wrong. And, I ran for superintendent 3 times, 6, 10, and 14. And each time I had something adopted. In 06, Jim Rex changed the testing program, not to what I wanted, but he changed it. Nonetheless, it was one of my platforms. In 2010, I wanted pathways to, 2-year college so you could get an industry standard certification in a skill, which Mick Zase adopted, right. But he never implemented. And then in 2014, one of my platforms, I still wanted the pathways to 2-year college because we have a high school diploma that is geared for everyone going to a 4-year college, and it's not working. So I had talked with Mary Thornley a long time ago, the president of Trident Tech.
Great lady. And
she agreed. She said, there's no need for people that want to go into a trade to have 3 years of math. Because if you look at the state test scores on Algebra 2, maybe 50% of our students are passing it. And most mathematicians will tell you Algebra 2 is a very specific math depending on the field you're going into. But we make everyone take it. And it's really not a necessary credit.
Elizabeth, so when you look at those Algebra 2 test scores in District 2, where should they be right now?
Well, for one, like I said, I don't think everyone should have to take it. But specifically, I'm not sure. It's probably the same as the state. It's probably 50.
50. So, okay, I know that obviously you ran for state superintendent of education because I had you in Quintin's Close-Ups a few years before that. But let me ask you this, Miss Elizabeth. So, obviously you didn't become state superintendent of education. So, what policies that you actually campaigned for that the current state superintendent of education, Molly Spearman, actually adopted?
Well, we had a 7-point grading scale, 97 to 100. I can't remember what it was, but anyway, it was where the majority of our students were competing to get into higher education. We're coming with a 10-point grading scale, which was to the detriment of our students. We had a 7-point, and they had a 10, so their GPAs were higher. And so she was able to get that adopted, and the number one reason the state did not want to change it was because of the money, the lottery money.
Oh, yes.
Because more children would qualify for lottery scholarships. And sadly, the lottery money is used a lot for chairs at higher education so we can attract the best and the brightest. And some of those chairs are $1 million, the chair of the department.
Right.
And they're using the lottery money for it.
Wow.
So that was Larry Grooms' biggest issue was, where are we going to find the money? It wasn't about students going on to higher education.
Wow. And since that time, he's been in the state senate for many years. Has he been able to find that money?
Well, they changed it, and so they did find it.
Okay. And how much of that lottery money actually came back to your district, District 2?
Um, that would be who qualified for going on to four-year college, and I'm not sure um, how many of those have. I'm sure quite a bit because Wando is our largest, probably the largest high school in the state,
Yes, ma'am.
and we have a lot of smart kids over there.
Yes.
So,
Let me take you over there because I was just over there yesterday for work, as you know. But let me ask you, speaking of which, because obviously they need the lottery scholarship money to get to college, how many of those kids at Wando High School actually have a high graduation rate?
um, it's higher for the white population than the black population. Um, I think the white population is over 92%, and the black population is at 75%.
Well, let me ask you this, Miss Elizabeth. What is that achievement gap between minority students and non-minority students, particularly at Wando High School?
Well, based on those numbers, that's about little over 20% are not performing.
Wow. And where else are they not performing as far as, say, reading and math?
Well, one of the things that I looked at, I've always looked sort of at the larger picture statewide. And what I found interesting is that English second language learners were scoring higher in history than the African American population, which I found strange. I don't know why.
And so, Miss Elizabeth, if you were to get on the Charleston County School Board, how would you help Wando High School adopt a 5-point plan to get those numbers to where it needs to be for those minority students?
Well, in state law, it says that school boards were like the first line to figure out what is not working and what needs to be changed, and we're supposed to communicate that to the state level. Specifically, as you well know, the state is a legislative state, and the legislatures, the superintendent basically, they have a voice, and they can lobby, but the people that are making the decisions is the appointed Education Oversight Committee,
right,
along with the State Board of Education, and both of those committees are appointed legislatively, and so they're the ones that decide our standards of learning and the assessments that we take in South Carolina. So it would be, to me, I would like to see some resolutions go over to them. And one of the things I would like to ask for, because my kids went to all different kinds of schools. They went to public, they went private, they went to Baptist, they went to Catholic, Montessori, I homeschooled. So I've kind of tried the whole thing of school choice. And outside of private school, what they use is the Iowa standardized test, which seems to be a good assessment of where students really are. What we have in South Carolina with our standardized test, which is aligned with our standards, is the teachers don't know, the teachers have to teach the standards, but they don't know what's going to be on the test. And we have a laundry list of standards, and there's no possible way a teacher could get through them all.
Wow.
I know I've read Jody, what's his name, Stallings with the Teacher Alliance.
Right.
He has complained in the past, and nothing's changed. Like, you have 38 standards for one point of the curriculum, and it's a lot. And so I did go and look at the kindergarten standards, because I've always said that they're not age grade or developmentally appropriate, and that we want kindergartners performing at first grade level, first grade at second at third, which they're not. That's like one of the standards says that for kindergarten, they should be able to read multiple texts and conceptualize and synthesize. And it's like, that's not kindergarten. What happened to ABC and 1, 2, 3? They're just learning to read in kindergarten. This idea that kids they're not ready for school because they're not reading. Well, most 5-year-olds are not reading. That's why they go to school to learn. We say we have the best and the brightest with our teachers, and that's why we send our kids to school. But then we expect our kids to already know what we're sending them to school to learn.
So what would be the appropriate standards right now for District 2 when you think of Charleston County schools?
Well, I think it's a statewide problem, and one that needs to be addressed. And like I said, it is our job as a local board to identify the things that are being mandated from the state, to have them address it so we can correct it. We keep doing the same thing expecting a different result, and we've got to change something.
So if you were on the board right now, Ms. Elizabeth, what would you identify right now to make those changes possible in District 2?
Well, as you know, you have to have 5 votes for any, to agree that you would like to see these things asked of the people that are making the decisions. And I would come up with some resolutions. For one, you can ask for waivers. As you well know, North Charleston High School did that, and they got a lot of them. I think they got them all. And I would like to implement maybe the Iowa and some of our less performing schools to actually see where students are, because I don't think the test we're using it's failing us. I think it's the
Yes, ma'am. So let me
I think it's the instrument.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this: how many waivers were given in District 2 over the past 4 years?
I don't believe they've asked for any.
Well,
I think North Charleston's the only one I've known to ask.
So where are the less performing schools in your district?
The majority of our schools are performing, except for St. James Santee. Lincoln was performing. Sadly, we closed Lincoln. I was on the board when that decision was made.
Right.
And I voted no, because I think community schools are really important. It's the fabric of the community. Additionally, those kids are on school buses for 2 hours a day. McClellanville's a long way away. Luckily, we were able to get the new high school for Lincoln on the referendum, but that's been in stalemate at the moment. But I'd like to bring up this point, because this is something else I would like. Title I money, for instance, Lincoln, they were, through the years, it depended. It was $19,000 to $25,000 per student that the school is receiving because of Title I money. And when we closed Lincoln, that Title I money did not go with those students to Wando for the resources that they might need. And that's because the federal government says 40% of your schools, 40% of the school has to be Title I to get Title I funding. The district had the option to make it higher, which they did. Our district's at 70%, which is very high. And we have a lot of Title I students in Mount Pleasant who aren't receiving that funding. And so the federal government allows for a waiver. You can ask for a district waiver to allow that money to follow the student. And I do believe we should do that.
So how much, with that Lincoln High School funding, where did that money actually go to, or where did it go back to?
It went into the Title I pool for the schools that are at 70%, and they got the money.
Wow. So ideally, or hypothetically, how much funding should District 2 be receiving right now, I should say?
I'm not sure what the number is on Title I. They're kind of, I tried to get into that when I was on the board, and it seems to be a very protected subject.
Interesting. This is something I want to ask you too, Miss Elizabeth. When we go back to Aranda, and obviously you live there and you know the area very well, but would a partial magnet school be ideal, high school be ideal for the area right now?
Well, we pretty much have that with the Centers for Advanced Studies at Wando. We underbuilt the second Wando, sadly. That school should have been built prior to the CAS. And I was part of that decision making because they had the community come together, which is a trick of the district. Let's get the community together, see what they say, and then we'll tell them what we're going to do. And so we all agreed we wanted a standalone second high school. And the district decided we were getting the Center for Advanced Studies instead. But that's not what the community wanted. We wanted a standalone. So we should have had the standalone prior to having the Center for Advanced Studies.
This is a silly question, Ms. Elizabeth, and I'm going to get to what I want to get to in just a second. But how much money did the Charleston County School District save by building the Center for Advanced Studies versus a second high school in Mount Pleasant?
Oh my gosh. It was over 50 million.
Wow. And now, obviously, they do have a second high school, which is like Lucy Beckham. Do you believe?
And we have cottages on there.
So, do you believe that school was underbuilt as well?
I do. I mean, at one point, I think Wando was at 4,000 students.
Right.
I do have a number somewhere about the size. Wando now has a little over 3,300 students.
Right.
And 1,738 of those students are at Lucy Beckham. So you're closer to 5,000. That was really at the Wando.
At the Wando,
It's a city. It was a city unto itself.
Sure.
It was always too big.
Right.
And sadly, large schools, a lot of kids go to school for extracurricular activity. That's what keeps them engaged. But when you have that size of a school, you only have so many spots for participation in extracurricular.
So what does that look like now in Lucy Beckham?
Well, that program's just getting off the ground. So what is it? It's first year?
Right.
And so I'm not sure what programs they have over there. I'm sure they tried to mirror a lot, but I don't think they have their own band program yet, which is a very exciting program. Let me tell you the story. It was so funny. So I was going to a meeting, and I was in the Wando parking lot, and I was asking the student for some directions. And the band was all mealing around at their practice field. And the next thing I know, I look up, and they'd all taken off running straight at my car. And so they're running at me, and then they're going like that. I had like 400 of them. It was just the wildest thing to experience. I think I might go back over and try to video it because it was just so funny.
Thanks for telling me that story. Yeah, you're talking to me like I'm talking to you on the phone as always. But let me ask you this. Let me stay in that area, kind of near that area. But let me talk to you about Carolina Park. How many more classrooms do you think the district should provide to prevent rezoning from happening there?
As many as it takes. You know what happened there. I'll tell you that. I have the backstory on that too, which is what I do come with some historical knowledge of decisions the district's made. We knew that Carolina Park, we were growing in North Mount Pleasant. We knew this. Everyone knew it. But instead, there was this push to build, a new Sullivan's Island Elementary, which made absolutely zero sense because the attendance zone, the enrollment numbers for the attendance zone were like 80 students for Sullivan's Island. The reason it had grown was because we made it a partial magnet, so kids from North Charleston, Guatemala, wherever, could come to Sullivan's Island and go to school, which is how they grew their enrollment. And in the bonds of 2004, 2009, there was $20 million sitting there. They already knew they were going to need a bigger school at Carolina Park. And the CFO had us, reallocate that $20 million for Sullivan's Island. So we had the money and we spent it somewhere else.
Well, when you look at the bonds today, how does that fit in with the growth plan for that area, for your district?
The way the referendum works by law is you have to build the projects that you said you were going to build, but if you run out of money prior to building the projects, then you don't have to build them. So I think our collections are fine right now in the referendum.
And when you talk about obviously growth in that particular area, let's talk about those attendance zones. How would that look in the next 5 years for that area, District 2?
Well, they approved a 200 subdivision lot out here in Allendale. So it's coming. I mean, we're not the country anymore. We're basically, north of Mount Pleasant, even though we're still in the county.
Right.
So that growth will be coming, and we will have those students. And I don't necessarily agree with the idea that you have to have 500 students to start a school. I don't agree with that. I did have some discussions with the district about that because they said that there was a rule, I guess, that we couldn't build a school unless we had 500. And when I asked to see the rule, they said, well, it was decided a long time ago, but they could never produce it. So it's just something they made up. They do that a lot. So, because you can start a charter school with 100 students. And I am on a charter school board right now, and we actually have 445 students in high school.
Wow.
At 2 campuses, one on James Island and one in North Charleston at Trident Tech. So I think smaller schools are better, but the logic from the district was a larger school costs less money. But I can never understand that because it doesn't make any sense. Because I know that if I live in a larger house, it's more money to build, more money for utilities, everything costs more. And insurance is not less. So bigger is not less expensive. They could never trick me on that one.
So right now, Miss Elizabeth, I know you're not on the board, but you have a lot of insight what's going on within this district. So what do you think there are things that the school district has allegedly made up that, people are taking for face value these days?
I haven't been sitting there with them. I've just been observing from afar. And what I have noticed about this board is they just agree with the recommendations from the administration. It's because it's easier to do that. You don't have to read. You can say, okay, that's what you want to do, fine, and then do that. And they don't ask any questions. And there are consequences to decisions. And for instance, wanting to divide the policy manual to give the superintendent carte blanche to make decisions without the board. I know that they've pedaled that back and said, oh, no.
They told me that in the previous, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this.
That's not what they initially said.
And as you know, you just mentioned it, I know the board is proposing to basically delegate the majority of its policy decisions to the superintendent. So let me ask you a question, a redundant question. what best practices can come out of all of this?
I don't think, I don't have a problem with the superintendent bringing things to the board's attention, but I think the board needs to ultimately have the decision. And it's really only smart on the part of the superintendent to make sure that they have the support, or the five, for the decisions that they're making, because it's a CYA.
Yes. And I know the board is also proposing to that potential board candidates like yourself be trained in their new governance concept. Are there any other examples of this in South Carolina?
Well, they've all tried it. I think we have too many outside consulting groups meddling in our local school board politics. Or, I know nobody wants to call it politics, but they're decisions, and it is political. We are elected, so I just think that the whatever this thing is, the greater community in schools, is something that we should not be a member of. I know that the Coalition for Kids, what's his name, Daniel Bates, had been worked for the mayor of Florida, Gillum.
Right. And
then he was hired here as a consultant for $10,000 a month. I don't know what he was doing, but I think when you delegate too much authority, you lose oversight as a board.
And so what recommendations for District 2 that have been basically overlooked by this particular board?
Well, I think we need to figure out how to fund the next high school. I think we underbuilt Lucy Beckham. We knew that North Mount Pleasant was growing 7 years ago, and now, they're dealing with that when they could have dealt with it earlier. But, we also, it was interesting when I was on the board, because you had sort of territorial board members that would be, Mount Pleasant is not getting one more thing until I get something in my district. And I never objected to anybody having, their needs met in their district. I was always in favor for the community. If there was a need, that we needed to address it. And somehow, because Mount Pleasant was performing, even though the district told Mount Pleasant and the town council that we have no failing schools in District 2 at the time, Mount Pleasant, not including District 1, which is McClellanville. But that was not true, because we still have failing students in our schools. They're just hidden because the test scores hide them from the bigger picture.
But let me ask you this: how many, unfortunately, failing school students are in these top performing schools in District 2?
I would venture to say at least 10, if not 20.
Wow.
And typically, sadly, it seems to be the African Americans. I watched your interview with Doris, and she had a lot of nails on the head when she was talking about performance.
Yeah, and that was Apostle Doris Johnson, who's running for that seat down there. Yes, ma'am. So, well, let me ask you a better question. We obviously know the demographics of Wando High School, but what is the poverty index for there right now?
Probably about the same, somewhere between 10 and 20. But they're not getting any, extra help for those students. And I think it's important to have those resources for students that are struggling. And they're not getting it right now.
What resources do those kids in District 2 need right now?
Well, I think the board needs to go back to the reading interventionists. That was a big push when I was on the board.
Right.
That, the superintendent then said, if we're not teaching reading, it's educational malpractice. and we're still practicing it. We need to focus.
And how many of those reading interventionalists will actually be needed for District 2?
Well, I know they at least need them part-time. I have the data from our intervention, we had interventionists throughout all of our elementary schools. And it was, to some degree, I think the district was trying to overstate the underperformance of students in reading just to justify having these interventionists, because a lot of kids were reading on grade level. There was a small few that needed extra help.
So, what is the reading and math proficiency that is right now at Wando?
Well, they changed math a long time ago, and they made it more of a reading. I mean, I think most kids, especially boys, did very well if you just had numbers, like, 10 minus 9 or 10 plus 9. But now it's, convoluted word problem. You have to figure it out. Like, if 3 people got on the train and 1 got off, 5 got on.
Right.
Yeah.
And how many books? Yes, ma'am.
The curriculum needs to be looked at, I think, for math and what we're using. I know that when I was on the board, it was something called everyday math, and no parent knew how to help with it, even if you were good at math.
Right. And what other curriculums, when you look at the Charleston County School District, that actually needs to be looked at right now to help these kids get to where they need to get to?
Well, I was saddened to see that the district decided to implement a new ELA curriculum at the beginning of the school year. I think teachers need to be listened to more. I don't think we listen enough to those in the classroom of what they think we need. And I would propose that we put together a teacher, maybe by grade level, and to review our standards and to review what we're doing and to find out from them, ideas of what they think, what they can identify that is working and identify what's not working.
So what's working in your district and what's not working in your district?
For the most part, our students are doing well, for the most part.
For the most part, okay. And let me go back, as I glossed over this, unfortunately, but let me go back to the Coalition for Kids. Do we actually really know who's running this company or this group besides the executive director?
They're investors. When they formed, they went and had Keith Summy for a while, and he withdrew. Anita Zucker was in on it, and Navarro. They basically, want to be the board, the back group. They want the board to be the point people, and they want to make the decisions in the back.
So who's the back group people now on the school board?
I have on the board?
Yes, ma'am. The back group right now.
All of those that were supported by the coalition. What they get, 5 of them? They got 5 votes. They got 5 appointed to the board. I mean, elected. Might as well have been appointed. They bought and paid for them.
Now, did they contact you for as far as trying to get your endorsement?
They sent me a survey, which I did not participate.
And I know that a lot of people have issue with that because they want to know why did they issue a survey that will allow them to excerpt partial answers.
I just know that I'm not a fan, and so I just didn't participate.
And you told me in and previously a couple of weeks ago that, hey, I have not gotten any endorsements for your this particular race. So tell me, why should people vote for you?
Because I'm an independent voice of reason for parents, teachers, students. I listen to everybody, the whole community. I was probably one of the only few when I was on the board that would actually go to constituent board meetings to find out what was going on in their districts. We actually had all the constituent districts come together and have community meetings and identify exactly what they felt that their district needed, because we are a large county. And for instance, we have one school district, but we have 16 municipalities with 16 mayors and town councils.
Right.
And so I think it's important to go out in the community because everyone is distinct and different. And they did. They all did the exercise, and their recommendations were shelved by the superintendent. We should have pursued it, but we can get those back off the shelf and have a relook at it.
And I have less than 20 seconds. But speaking of the superintendent, would you, if voted obviously to school board again, would you keep on Donald Kennedy as permanent superintendent?
Well, until we locate a new one, yeah, I would. Because I think leadership's important, and you just you can't be willy-nilly and be moving people from here and there, because we did that under Jarita's watch. I watched that. That was a disaster where she just decided she was just going to upset the apple cart and move everybody and change up. And because I think principals are a really important part of the leadership of a school. And I know with Jake Rambo, that was a big issue when he was, taken out of his position. The school was upset. Nobody was happy about it. And it shouldn't have happened.
But hopefully, if he were to put his name in the hat for the permanent superintendent, would you vote to keep him permanently?
I think there are better qualified candidates.
Elizabeth Moffly, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin. Have a great day.
You too.